So I'm going to start today's elective with what I believe you kids would call lore, at least that is the impression that I am getting from talking to my lab, about the legendary Ken Strange and why he's kind of inspired me to give this elective. And then I'm going to talk you through Ken's 20 rules for speaking. And then we will watch a speech from a debater who did not work directly with Ken because unfortunately, Ken's era kind of came before we had a lot of video taped speeches that we could use for kind of demos like this, but someone who is a product of Ken's legacy. So Ken Strange was the director of debate here at Dartmouth for 35 years. 35 years. That is twice the length of time that most of you have been alive, if not more. That is a really long time. And Ken's coaching achievements with the Dartmouth Forensic Union included winning 3 national debate tournament championships, 3 NDTs is a lot of NDTs, 5 NDT second places, so zooming out from the winning, getting to the finals is also very difficult. He did that 5 times on top of winning 3 times, and 9 NDT third places, so semifinalists, did that 9 times. His peers selected him as the coach of the decade for the 1980s, and in a coaching feat that may never be equaled, Dartmouth won at least 1 elimination round at the National Debate Tournament every year from 1980 to 2009. So, the National Debate Tournament, as most of you know, is the college national championship. It is very difficult to get to the elimination rounds. You have to win 5 debates against the best of the nation. And then the elimination rounds is where, things get really hard, and he managed to get to Monday of the NDT every year from 1980 to 2009, which again spans a really long time. Ken taught John Turner, obviously, a great deal of what he knows about debate. Turner debated for Ken from 1999 to 2003, and he coached for Ken for a year or 2 after college, and then obviously came back to take over the program after Ken retired. And so I asked Turner for a couple of just comments about Ken's coaching, and particularly as it pertains to speaking. He said, Ken's persistence and attention to detail means that no matter your base level talent, you're likely to improve substantially working with Ken. The most talented Dartmouth teams did very well, as was the case for many other talented teams at good programs with good coaches. But being the type of person who writes down process and writes down suggestions and then applies them consistently and practices them consistently is the approach that generates such a strong foundation. And he also said Ken did more reblocking and re-tagging to get to clear explanations in his own paper files, because obviously Ken debated and coached entirely in an era when we used paper, or not entirely, he dabbled in paperless at the end, but he did more blocking and retagging to get clear explanations into paper files than most of us are willing to do, even when we're simply shuffling things around in a little navigation pane on our laptops. So that's from Turner. I met Ken when I was in high school, and so a little background about me. I grew up here in Hanover, like a mile from where we are right now, and I went to Hanover High School, which did not have a debate program, but Ken's wife at the time was a social studies teacher at our high school, and a group of students who included my brother lobbied her to coach debate there at Hanover High, because they're like, you have coached, you know debate, obviously Ken, it seems like we should do something, we should have a debate program. And so that is when I met Ken. I attended the DDI in 2005. So that is before many of you were born, which sucks. But anyway, my family could not afford the full tuition for the DDI. So Ken had me photocopy books for the Institute Library, because he used to, again, before electronic resources were what they are now, a lot of card cutting was done out of the physical books, and he would keep an Institute library of kind of the best books, the most topic relevant titles that a lot of people would want to use. And so you could go to the Institute library, get a photocopy and then check it back out. Anyway, he had me photocopy books for the Institute library as a way of kind of or as a means of reducing tuition, which he did not have to do. Like, you know, the scholarships and stuff that we have now is much more accessible than it was at that time, and there is no particular reason that he would need to go out of his way to help me attend the camp, but he did. And in 2011, I had graduated from Emory and asked Ken if I could work at the DDI, and he agreed, and I've been teaching here ever since. Ken was an incredibly important mentor to me because he was one of the people who saw something in me and believed that I could do this as a career, even though my own college debate pedigree was not particularly impressive. And as a younger woman who had never achieved any great competitive heights, I interacted with a lot of older white men who dismissed me, and for a long time, many male coaches, including some who I now consider very good friends, you know, kind of treated me like I had nothing to contribute to the activity because of my background, because of who I was, and Ken never did. He just never treated me as anything less than a colleague with great potential. So I had the opportunity to teach with Ken. For a couple of summers, we taught the kind of shorter workshop that came before the DDI together, and then we taught one summer a lab at the DDI, which was an amazing experience that I'll never forget, and that is how I came to be in possession of Ken's speaking skills, which is what we are going to move on to now. So there are 20 rules for speaking, and I discovered in kind of giving this elective previously that there is a little bit of redundancy and overlap in some of them, but I will not be editing Ken, so I am keeping them that way, and it means that it's something that Ken considered really important. First section is flow speak. Bless you. Number 1, all arguments need tags. Every single argument, whether carded or analytic, needs a tag. It should be relatively short. It should front load important words. If a short tag is a problem, do the best you can and add a second explanatory sentence. And then Ken has or more for K-goo, because that is a Kenism. Analytic arguments must have a tag and an explanation, just like a carded argument has a tag and then a card. So you tag your analytics with the same attention to detail that you tag your cards. Number 2, give off-case arguments a name. Do not just start with your individual points. So that would be, you know, T strengthen, or the politics DA, or the capitalism critique, or the sui generis counterplan. Label your off-case arguments. To transition between pages, pause and say loudly and slowly, now, and the name of the argument, and then pause again. You need to give the judge and the opponents the opportunity to flip over the page or move over their Excel sheet, whatever it is that they do to flow. You need to give them time to move from one page to the next. And pausing before you say now on and then the label, and then pausing again after gives ample time to finish flowing everything that you said on the one page, and then to move on to the next page. Number 3, pause before and after tags. Pause and breathe before and after each tag before the cite. This one really gets people because you are very used to attaching the cite to the end of the tag and then taking a deep breath. The reason to do it this way and to breathe after the tag and not the cite, the pause where you breathe is where the judge has, again, the time and space to write down the argument, to process and transcribe what you are saying. That pause should come after the tag because that is the information you want the judge to process. When you pause after the cite, you're giving them more time to write down the author name, which many people don't even bother to try to write down, let alone like that is not the most important part of what you want the judge to write down. So your pause ought to give the judge the time to write down what is important. And that comes after the tag and not after the cite. So that one takes a lot of practice. I really recommend, doing a speaking drill where that is what you are focusing on, where your pauses are coming after your tag and before your cite. Because it is not, we are taught for whatever reason to do it the other way. And so it takes some time to adjust and kind of get used to. Number 4, tags are louder and slower. Your tag should be read louder and at 1/2 to 3/4 of your full speed. Again, we're talking about what is the important information that the judge needs to get down. Tags are very important. Analytical arguments are very important. You must be slowing down and emphasizing them. So 1/2 to 3/4 speed and louder. So that's the flow speak section. Any questions about any of that? Okay, the next section is about speed. Number 5, start off slower. You should start at roughly 50% of your top or maximum speed and build up to full speed over about 15 to 20 seconds. Starting at top speed does yourself a massive disservice because it is so difficult to flow when you are going at top speed, and you want to give the judge the opportunity to adjust to your voice and internalize what is happening. Number 6, inflect and enunciate. Read the card content with normal inflection. You should not sound, when you are speaking at top speed, as if you are speaking a different language. You should sound as if you are speaking the same way that you do in conversation. It is simply faster. And in normal conversation, we inflect and enunciate. You have a sense of, importance, you have a sense of emotion, you have a sense of, urgency when you're having a normal conversation and someone is using inflection and enunciation to speak with you. It is the same in debate. Cites and cards can be read at full speed if necessary, but you should emphasize important words and be sure to enunciate. A speaking drill that I like to do here is to basically slow all the way down so that you are barely speaking faster than conversational speed, and listen to where you naturally inflect, where you naturally enunciate, where the pauses are, so that when you speak at top speed, you are still including those things. Number 7, top speed is unnecessary. So when I taught the shorter workshop that I mentioned that came before the DDI with Ken for a couple of years, we would do speaking skills with those students. And one that he had every single one of them do was read at top speed, a card or a set of cards, time it, and then read exactly that same set of cards at about 2/3 to 75% speed and see how much was lost or not. And usually, like the vast majority of the time, the content that would be lost was like a half a sentence. So your top speed is not as fast as you think because of what Ken called disfluencies. Anyone heard that word before? He's the only person I ever heard use it. You've heard it before?
There was this one disability case that was called disfluency that we hit last season.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so when Ken used that word in this context, it was like when you stumble, when you like are unable to finish the sentence, or you have a, kind of like can't get through a complete sentence without kind of some interruption or pause. Those disfluencies slow you way down and mean that you are not as fast as you think you are. To borrow from another legendary coach, Ross Smith, speed is the number of arguments communicated per minute. Speed is not literal words delivered. It is arguments communicated per minute. And so anything that maximizes the number of arguments you are communicating is making you faster, even if you are speaking slower. So Ken's thing and number 7, the kind of fill out for number 7 says everything else, explanation, analytics, plans, counterplans, etc., should be read at no more than 3/4 speed. I do think also that, I don't think this is in here, but the, plans and counterplan texts I absolutely think should be at like 50% speed at a maximum. You want the judge to know what the plan and the counterplan do, which means that you want to slow down. Number 8, enunciate and speak up. If clarity is a problem, over enunciate and get louder. This is like, one weird trick they don't want you to know about getting clearer is that if you are louder, you are automatically clearer. Number 9, stand still. Do not speak in the rhythm of body movement. Standing still is usually best. So I think this is an interesting one because I think the vast majority of debaters have a little bit of movement. The real thing, is when it gets to be distracting, right? Like, you don't want your movement to interfere with your communication with the judge, and standing still is a good way to make sure that there is no distracted movement. I coached one debater who used to like kind of run in place. That was very funny, but when he stood still, he sounded much better. So we tried to get rid of the running in place. But like, how many of you think you have like a natural like movement thing that you do during your speaking? Yeah, it's very common, and it is not to say like you must be an absolutely rigid, mummy, but standing still is better than having distracting movements. Number 10, time yourself twice. Oh, this is what I was just talking about. So as an experiment, time yourself for a few minutes going as fast as you can. Then read the same stuff at what feels like 3/4 speed. You will be surprised at how little more time it takes you. And this is especially true if the fast as you can version includes double breathing and disfluencies. Questions about speed? Next section is about breathing. Number 11, breathe before and after tags. And then I'm not kidding you, he wrote, remember to breathe before and after tags. This is so, so important. Number 12, no double breathing. Double breathing slows you down. It is so much less efficient that it forces you to breathe more often because you aren't getting as much air into your lungs when you do it, so you have to breathe more, which automatically makes you slower, adds more time that is just breathing time which is not speaking time. So it is much, much better to stop and take a full breath. It might feel like a long pause, but it's really not. The time that it takes to pause and take a breath, again, like it's a beat that the judge gets to kind of process and write down your arguments. It is not costing you any real time. It is giving you more time that is not being spent double breathing. How many people here think that they double breathe? Okay, so I really recommend that you take, like the next couple of weeks of speaking drills where you're just focusing on that. You are reducing to eliminating your double breathing. Single breaths only. Number 13, breathe at punctuation. When you need to breathe in a card, do it at a punctuation mark or a natural sentence break. This is another extremely important one that people seem to have trouble with for a while because they think it feels unnatural. The thing is, it makes you sound more natural. It makes you sound more human. If you're breathing in the middle of a sentence, you're breaking up that sentence. Breathing at natural sentence breaks mimics what you do in normal conversation. Again, like, this is, because we are taught, I really wish that we could, get people starting out this way. So, like, when you learn how to read fast, what do people tell you?
Only breathe when you have to.
Right, they're like, don't breathe unless you absolutely must, which is what produces the thing where you're taking these like deep gasps kind of all over the place. What other kind of like advice did you get when you were just starting out speed reading? Yeah, I feel like that is because we don't get a lot of advice about how to do it starting out. They're just like, this is how it sounds. Now your turn. Anyway, I wish that breathing at sentence breaks was more incorporated into how we explain speed reading to novices. Questions about breathing? Next section is about volume and audibility. And this is actually the last section, but there's, 6 more. 14. Tags should be louder. Remember to be louder and slower on the tags. Number 15, volume is good. High volume forces you to enunciate. I cannot emphasize enough that if you project your voice, it will increase your clarity. It forces you to enunciate in a way that kind of a lower volume does not. So the tendency towards mumbling that we sometimes get when doing fast speaking is heated by quietness. So you can mumble much more mumbly when you are quieter. When you are louder, it is much harder to mumble. Number 16, maintain your volume. You do not want to get quiet on the content of cards. So we've emphasized repeatedly volume of tags, but you do not want to lapse into mumbling within the content of your cards. Number 17, face the judge. Get as close, as comfortable to the judge as you can. Remember, the judge is the person we're trying to persuade. You need to get close. Don't be weird, obviously, but get close to the judge and definitely face them. This was something, this summer I think I have not seen any issues with this, but this was something that a few years of kind of online debate really eroded. So like one of the national debate tournament in, I guess it was 2022, the first NDT back after Zoom NDT, I judged a debate where the 1A stood in the corner and faced the corner. And there was one judge online and the other two of us were in the room. So for the online judge, they didn't know that anything was off. They were like, yep, seems normal, 1AC. And the two of us who were in the room were like, what is happening? Is this person really delivering an entire 1AC to the corner and standing with their back to us? And I really think that is because some time of online debate just kind of made it harder to remember what it is like to be in the room. But, we have spent enough time back that I think that probably comes naturally to you now, which is good. Number 18, maintain a pathway to the judge. Make sure that there is nothing like a computer screen between your mouth and the judge. So that can mean lowering the computer screen, standing at a slight angle. It certainly means that you should pay attention to your stand and do not have a stand that is super high nor super low. Have it so that you can read comfortably and effectively, but so that your mouth is not blocked. So maintain a pathway to the judge. Number 19, speak well throughout the speech. You need to be thinking about these things all the way through the speech. It is one thing to start out sounding pretty good and then lapse into some of your bad habits and have it really fall off, and it is another thing to speak effectively throughout the speech. Since I'm giving speaking drills advice here, one of my other favorites and one that I think is really important is stamina. So I would speak for at least 15 minutes. Why do I say 15 minutes? Well, in a given debate, your total time speaking is 13, right? You give a 5-minute rebuttal and an 8-minute constructive. So the total amount of time that you're speaking is 13 minutes. So if you practice speaking for 15 minutes, it means that you have exceeded the amount of speaking time that you need for a given debate. And so that builds your stamina so that if in a debate with 13 minutes of speaking time, you're much less likely to kind of collapse. Number 20. Good debaters are fast but clear. Remember that bad debaters just try to go fast and usually aren't because of things like double breathing and disfluencies. And good debaters try to be clear so that the superiority of their arguments is understood. If what you're saying doesn't make any sense, there's an incentive to kind of bury it under speed and mumbling. Clarity helps establish the superiority of your arguments. Questions? Yeah.
Can you explain that? What is that?
It's when you take a breath and then another breath immediately after, so the like, that thing. Don't think about it. Pretend we never talked about it. You don't know what it is. You've never done it. There was a hand over here. Yeah.
What if your problem is like being too fast, like speaking slow, and you like often like mess up your words, or like when you try to go fast, you don't like use the word quick enough, so you have to like go back and repeat it.
Sure. So that's an example of a disfluency. So a lot of that is just practice. That the more that you practice speaking faster, that will help you get familiarity and comfort with doing it. Second, practice with blocks and cards and arguments that you actually make in debates. So your 2AC blocks or your 2NC blocks or your 1AC are all examples of materials that you will actually deliver in debates. And practicing reading those as quickly as you can both, gives you some foundation in the speed part of it and gives you familiarity and comfort with that exact material, so that you are more familiar with it, so you're less likely, it's as if you're in a play and delivering your lines, you can do it effectively even with a little bit of like memory, muscle memory for it. And then what was the third thing I was going to say? Just like, it is more important that you be clear and effective than it is that you are fast. So like, there are some people who find that they are slow, and that becomes part of their debate persona, and that can be very effective as well. Like, I have coached and seen some very slow debaters who are very, very good. And so if you find over time that you're like, speed is not working for me, and when I push it, everything falls apart, then go at a pace that is comfortable and that avoids those problems, and start to work with that speed as part of what you're doing. Does that make sense? Other questions? Okay, we are going to watch a speech delivered by Ram Tambe, who debated for Dartmouth from, I guess, 2017 through 2021, and won the national debate tournament in 2021. It happened that was the Zoom NDT that I was referring to. So we have a good number of, because he debated online his whole senior year, we have a number of ROM videos that are on the internet, which is great. So this debate is not like a big elim debate. It is a pre-elimination round where the negative has gone for a topicality violation, and it's a 2AR. And the reason I like this speech is that I think it showcases Ram's speaking abilities. And, there's a sense in which using Ram as an example is sort of unfair, because he was pretty naturally talented and naturally a very good speaker, but he certainly worked with Turner over his time at Dartmouth to improve at speaking. And again, those foundations were built by Ken. So I think that this is a good showcase of some of that stuff. So watch it with kind of an eye toward, how he sounds and what you like about what he sounds, what you like about how he sounds, and certainly anything that you don't like, we can talk about. But that's the speech we're going to watch. Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. Oh, volume.
I take it we're all ready. The negative interpretation goes too far. It is analogous to cutting off your head for the sake of a limit's headache. Our counter-interpretation is the perfect middle ground that preserves equal access for both sides. Impact calculus should not be decided on terminal impacts. Neg ground outweighs aft ground is a silly way to look at debate because side bias arguments are ultimately based on your speaker position. You should instead care about our internal link to aft ground versus our internal link, their internal link to negative ground. Our internal link to aft ground is comparatively massive and unmitigated. Their counter-interpretation and functional limits arguments, however, sufficiently mitigate their negative ground arguments that you should air aft. We have a major point of offense is predictability. Our interpretation, their interpretation is not what anyone would expect when getting the word to getting the resolution would expect it to mean. It is in fact egregiously unpredictable. Arbitrary interps outweigh an internal link. You should filter standards by how well they shape research practices. We don't start by randomly cutting apps we think are good and then trying to fit them into the topic. We start by cutting T cards and then seeing what the boundaries of the topic are and deciding whether or not that fits in there. The search for a predictable interp is the whole point of T. It turns any limits arguments they have. If the goal was just to limit the topic, we would just debate healthcare again, but we can agree that that would not be fair for the affirmative because that would mean the neg would always win. They can always find an interp that says, hey, it would be better to make it smaller and smaller. But if you cannot say that you could look at the topic and reasonably assess, this is what I think these words mean, then that is not what you should do. We have three internal links to this predictability argument that were basically dropped. Ace of point, context. They have no argument about alliance commitments, no argument about international policy. Their cards are all from one North Dakota charitable solicitation case. Our evidence is from the plain meaning of the word substantial, which is the only reasonable way anyone can assess what the words in the topic mean. Piece of point, grammar. They have dropped the EEOC indite that we read at the top of the flow, or that Tyler read in the 1AR, that says our evidence is not even defining the phrase in the resolution. It is defining substantial limit, which is grammatically distinct from substantially limiting. It internal link turns all of their standards because they are not legally precise. Seize the point. They are not. There is a difference. Limit does not mean eliminate. They cannot take these words out of context. Our current evidence is citing a court case that said Congress's limitations are distinction from eliminations, which means you should not arbitrarily read into the implication of this card is that you should not read substantial limit as a term of art. There is no reason that is the case. Substantial modifies limit, but does not mean those two must be always joined together. Disappoint, framers intent also dropped. They only said CETA should have seen it. CETA the topic votes we got explicitly distinguished terminate from eliminate or terminate from limit, which implies that those two were intended to be different, and it would be totally unfair for the app to say after the fact that we think it should be this other thing. Now at the top they say that they are the only words in the top. Now their arguments, they say that they are the only word in the topic that was entered above. They are not the only word. They are not defining the words in the topic, and you should not read it as a term of art. They say a ground. We have link turned their ground standard because our internal link to aft ground is much bigger. One, solvency advocates, or the framing issue for deciding ground arguments is you have to give a vision of what the debate is. Their vision in Crossix was, oh, just aft impact turns everything. DDEV 2AC, pro-lift good 2AC. That's a ridiculous. It cannot sustain for the rest of this tournament, much less a year's worth of debate. We have multiple other internal links to this other than ground, which are picks. We stopped reading native withdrawal because our only answer to picks was pro-lift good, which is sort of the same argument above, but they do not have an argument for why that is much bigger because we have nothing else to say. The negative always has the A5 pick. They always have the functional limits that I will explain slightly below. So you should care more about the aft ground than neg ground. Also, predictability outweighs ground because we need to know what is in the topic in order to prepare. You can't just say, oh, it would be great if we had a good econ DA on this topic. Neg gets econ DA. That is unpredictable and means predictability outweighs ground. Now, they say side bias that was answered above because you should not decide based on terminal impacts but internal links. Now, 2EC2, our counter interpretation. We have two ways our counter interpretation mitigates their offense. One, they have no answer to the definition of the word limit. It means it must limit adversaries, provocations, and locations. So you can't just do insane stuff like limit out from the time if the Messiah returns, because that's not an actual adversary, location, or provocation type. They're all listed in the treaty, so there's a finite number of cases, and it further dwindles the number of possible solvency advocates, so you can't cut a crackpot on the internet. Two, substantial considerable is a limit. It is a common meaning, and there are many qualitative measures you could use in this context. Do you have recent evidence? Do you have a scholar in the main? Is this something that is geopolitically significant? You know it when you see it, and you know the SDS is geopolitically significant, but perhaps the moon may not be. They say choose what is legally acceptable. That is one. That is a bad frame because we are not lawyers making decisions. We are in debate. You should care somewhat about the sensibility of their interpretation in this case. Two, they are not legally acceptable. Just because they are from a high court does not mean the court is making a relevant rendering of the words in the resolution, nor of the context of what we are discussing. It would be different in alliance commitments, which is all the A through D subpoints I explained above. They say dangling modifier. They did not define the word in the resolution, so this is a total non-starter. And even if it is, this assumes substantial must be. It assumes they are reading substantial limitation as a term of art. You should read those two separately. They say 2EC short. SL means super long, dumbass. They say their interpretation was new. This is not a new argument. This has been being read since GSU, and it has won like one debate, I think. They say their Virginia court is not fair. Just because they have a higher court does not mean the higher court is making a rendering on the relevant judgment. You should instead make a rendering on whether or not they are defining the words, and only our evidence defines the plain meaning. Only we have evidence that says how has it been defined in debate. Our evidence also says that more commonly courts take the broader view, so you should not take an artificially narrow view. Now, their defense to our ground standard, their healthcare example goes the opposite way. Healthcare was a topic with only solvency cards. Both sides agreed agreed econ and disease were the only terminal impact, which is frankly the opposite of this topic where the neg just proliferates terminal impacts, the AF reads no solvency, and it's a ridiculous debate. They say the overarching theory good, smaller AFs can use theory, and it is better to use that because it makes that debate more nuanced, so they do not turn our ground arguments. Now, 2AC5 functional limit solves it, mitigates enough of their offense. One, solvency advocates. Substantial is not the only thing you should care about. You should also care. There's a reason that 3 teams broke Japan Cyber yesterday and 3 teams broke Japan Bloody Nose second semester. It is because there are very few solvency cards on this topic, demonstrated from the fact, which is empirically borne out and probably borne out by all of your team's research. Second, DA case defense. No 2N, a 2N that is flowing the case and does not just extend 2NCT substantial or read the consult Colin Call counter plan would have an actual strategy. They could go for the A5 pick. There are many things the neg can do, which means it is not try or die for limits. The negative goes too far. You should not vote for this argument because it is totally unfair for the app, and what ends it is just wrong. It's unpredictable. Instead, we have sufficient defense to their limits argument, so it's not try or die for limits. You should vote AF to preserve AF ground.
Okay. What did you notice?
He definitely probably can go faster than that, but he was like doing his best to be absolutely clear. I understood every word of the 2A.
Right, yeah, you understood every word crystal clear. Agreed, Ron was capable of going faster. It would not have helped. A topicality debate in particular is like a little bit harder to flow, a little bit information dense, and the 2AR has to like put together a bunch of different pieces and really indicate to the judge why they ought to vote AF. And so the clarity and ease of understanding is really valuable. What else? Yeah.
He seems like a great job of like sort of tagging, or not tagging, like just tagging each argument.
Yeah, no, he does a phenomenal argument tagging job. Each argument, he starts with what he wants you to write down. It is something that is cognizable to write down, that is very, clear and understandable, and that front loads what the argument is going to be. I think Ron was incredibly good at that. Agree. What else? Yeah.
Like the way he spoke sounded like a natural conversation. Like he had those inflections, it didn't just sound like how people usually sound.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll add, well, I'm curious what you think about this. So, agree and excellent work. He speaks and sounds as though it is a conversation that is just going a little bit faster. They're all complete sentences. They are not fragments. Even where it is like extend to AC5, it is a very clear explanation of the argument and sounds like it could be a normal conversation. I'm curious, how much of that speech, the 2AR, would you guess was written by the 1A? As far as I can tell, none. And how do you, like, why do you answer that? Why do you think that? Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you were in my elective where I ranted about this, but when you read a part of a speech that was written by someone else, you sound worse. You just do. You sound and are likely to get more confused. You are more likely to stumble. You don't know where the important inflection points are. You simply sound worse. Other points that you noticed. I alluded to this a second ago, but he's using 2AC5 and 2AC6 and 2AC7, and he is telling you those numbers, right? Like, you all, in my experience this summer, have improved tremendously at numbering your 2ACs, and then it is like that never happened. And here is a 2AR, which could easily just be like, I'm simply answering the 2NR, who is instead tying his arguments back to particular arguments in the 2AC that are labeled by number. There is also substructure to a number of these arguments. Did you notice that? There would be an ABC or a 1, 2, 3. Yeah. That the 2AC makes? Yeah, so great question. Who knows my answer to this? Someone in here does, yeah. Backflowing. So if your 1A flows the 2AC twice, you have a flow of the 2AC. If you don't, if that doesn't happen, because I have no reason to believe that that was the case for Rob and Tyler, particularly because they were in different locations, so that probably wouldn't have worked. My guess is like it's some combination of really, really good argument familiarity, and then, like flowing the 1AR does give you, it's like when the 1AR extends 2AC, whatever, now you have a flow of what was in the 1AR that was in the 2AC, Good question. Yeah.
What are your opinions on him saying subpoint after like each letter?
Oh, like A subpoint, B subpoint. I could go either way on that. I sort of agree with the notion that it is not perhaps best practice because it's inefficient. But on the other hand, the like flip side is like it makes sure that the judge knows exactly what you're doing. So I could go either way on that one. Other thoughts? Yeah.
How do you know when to use like letters or numbers when you're like doing the substructure for your argument?
Yeah, so as a general principle, the two speeches that we hard number are the 2AC on the off case and the 1NC on the case. Those are where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 happen. Within those, I would use letters. So if you're substructuring a particular argument within the 2AC off case or the 1NC on case, ABC is how I would substructure those. By kind of the end of the debate, so like in this ROM example, there's a couple places where he's on, say, 2AC6 or whatever, and he gives them the subpoints numbers, and that is not ideal because of the, the external structure is numbering, the internal structure should be letters, but it is, by the end of the debate, it matters a little bit less because nobody is going to be referencing it later. Sure. Other thoughts? Okay, well then thank you all for coming, and you can go to your next elective.